Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome everyone to the first meeting of the House Education Committee for the 2024 regular session. We're going to ask all members and guests to silence your cell phones, please. I want to advise our guests that if you do wish to speak on an item, there is a sign-up sheet in the back as you came in. Additional testimony is at the discretion of the chair due to based on the time restraints and the information already presented. Also, a reminder, there are no signs permitted in committee meeting rooms. I just want to refresh the members quickly on the rules, some rules that we established last session on House Committee substitutes and House Committee amendments. Those are due in by 4 p.m. on the day prior to the meeting. So if you do have you have a committee amendment, committee substitute, you need to get that to our education staff prior to 4 p.m. on the day before. Do any of our members have any comments or introductions at this time? Okay, if not, I do have one introduction. We have the House Education Committee has an intern for this session, Ms. Ashton Montgomery. Where is Ashton at?
Behind the post.
Come, I can't see you, Ashton. Step on out. That post there has got me in my way there. But Ashton is a resident of Henry County, and she's currently attending Asbury University. So please help me join Ashton for our session. At this time, I'll ask Mariah to please call the roll.
Representative Ballman?
Present.
Representative Bojanowski?
Here.
Representative Brown? Representative Emily Callaway?
Present.
Representative Josh Callaway? Representative Decker? Representative Doan?
Present.
Representative Jackson?
Present.
Representative Lewis?
Present.
Representative Massaroni?
Present.
Representative McCool?
Here.
Representative Rayburn?
Here.
Representative Rawlings?
Here.
Representative Raymond? Representative Riley? Representative Timoney?
Here.
Representative Wilner? Vice Chair Baker?
Here.
Vice Chair Truitt?
Here.
Chair Tipton?
Here. We do have a quorum. We're going to proceed. If you remember at the December interim joint meeting, we had a presentation, and one of the things that KDE presented to us was some update on the KSA, Kentucky Summative Assessment Scores. Today's meeting is a follow-up to that for the schools that need improvement on what the process is and how that works. So we've asked KDE. So if KDE would come present now, we have Dr. Kelly Foster, Associate Commissioner, and I'm going to ask everyone to please identify yourself for the records. Just make sure that green light is on your microphone, and please pull those microphones close to you. For some reason, they don't pick you up if it's not real close to you. So if you all will introduce yourself for the record, then I'll administer the oath.
Good morning. My name is Dr. Kelly Foster. I'm the Associate Commissioner of the Office of Continuous Improvement and Support.
Good morning. I'm Matthew Courtney. I'm the Policy Advisor to the Office of Continuous Improvement and Support.
Okay, please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, please proceed.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you, Chair Tipton and Co-Chair Baker and Truitt for inviting us over today to talk a little bit about the supports that the Kentucky Department of Education provides to low-performing schools across Kentucky. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about federal requirements as well as state requirements. And to start our presentation off with today, we will talk about the 3 federally required statuses when looking at low-performing schools across the state. So one that you're probably very familiar with is called Comprehensive Support and Improvement, better known as CSI, and those are currently identified every 3 years. The next year in Kentucky that those CSI schools will be identified is 2025. And there are 3 categories in CSI. The first one is the bottom 5% of schools by level. So the bottom 5% of elementary schools, the bottom 5% of middle schools, and the bottom 5% of high schools. Then if you have a high school that has a graduation rate below 80%, they would qualify for CSI. And if you're a school that has failed to exit ATSI status after 3 years, then you would roll over into CSI status. And currently today in Kentucky, we have 28 CSI schools. The second category is called Targeted Support and Improvement Schools, and better known as TSI, and those are identified every year. And for a school to be identified federally as a TSI school, they have a subgroup that is performing at or below the bottom 5% by level for 3 consecutive years. And the final classification is Additional Targeted Support and Improvement, better known as ATSI, and that is identified every 3 years, and the next cycle for that would be in 2025. And in order to be identified for ATSI, it would be the year 2025, and if you had been TSI the year before and didn't exit, then you would roll over into that ATSI status. And currently we do not have any of those. So there are items in statutory and regulation to talk about the process. In Kentucky, the process for school improvement can be found in KRS 16346 and 703 KAR 5:280. So I'm going to walk you through what happens when a school is identified for CSI status. The first being that once the school report card is released, typically in October, we look to see if anybody meets the criteria for CSI. And we have education recovery staff at the department that once a school is identified as CSI, they are assigned to one of the CSI schools from day one of that identification. We bring those schools in, we go through statute and regulation on what it means to be CSI, what type of federal funding that they're eligible for, and the process that they're getting ready to undergo. The first part of that process is to undergo a diagnostic review. So the school will go through a diagnostic review process as well as the district. Then the local Board of Education, once that diagnostic review is delivered to the school and the district, the local Board of Education will select a vendor to support the turnaround efforts at that school. Then the schools in the district develop a 3-year turnaround plan that is approved by the local Board of Education and the Kentucky Department of Education. Once the turnaround plan is submitted, then each CSI school also submits a School Improvement Fund application, which is called a SIF grant, and there are federal dollars that they will be eligible for to support the work of their 3-year turnaround plan. And then after that, schools and districts begin to implement their plans. The type of activities that KDE staff do with CSI schools basically are designed based on the needs of the school and the results of that diagnostic review. But I've listed here today what that looks like. If KDE is selected by the local Board of Education to serve as the turnaround vendor, the KDE provides the following supports: mentoring and providing support to school leadership, assisting with standard curriculum instruction and assessment alignment, delivering timely job-embedded professional learning, supporting the continuous improvement process through planning and monitoring, support resolving issues with compliance and reporting, and giving them access to lots of nationally known professional learning. I've listed a few examples: Carnegie, Cognia, Shipley, National Institute for School Leadership, and the Rutherford Learning Group. And we provide education recovery staff members in those buildings on a daily basis. We also want to talk a little bit today about the support for TSI and ATSI schools. The Every Student Succeeds Act, which you've probably heard as referenced as ESSA, the federal law from 2015, requires that local school districts provide the interventions to support their TSI schools. That is not a requirement of the state. That is a requirement of the local school district. TSI schools are required, once upon identification, to amend their comprehensive school improvement plan to include the following items. They need to address components of turnaround leadership. They need to go through a resource and equities process to make sure that they're spending their money correctly to meet the needs of all students in their building. They need to identify evidence-based interventions that they will use to help come out of that TSI status, and then also additional actions taken to support students from consistently underperforming groups. This year, at the department, we are able to provide some additional resources to TSI schools, and this is just for the 23-24 school year. Due to the lack of new CSI schools being identified this fall, we have staff available to support TSI schools for the 23-24 school year. And this is an optional support. Once the TSI schools were identified, we did a webinar with all of the TSI school principals and their superintendents and told them about this assistance that they could receive, and then they signed up for that. And so a school who is currently TSI who has opted in for support from the department, I've listed some of the examples of the support that they are receiving. The first thing that we do is we go in and do a 2-day review of that school that focuses specifically on curriculum and instruction. We work with them to deconstruct that review and develop a strategic plan. We sometimes call those, in the world of education, a 30, 60, 90-day plan to make the work very manageable and have real-time deadlines. We walk them through a needs assessment analysis. We tailor professional learning for the teachers and the administrations based on what we found in that 2-day review. We provide coaching in the areas of leadership as well as teacher development. We work with them on developing a solid professional learning community process if they don't have one in their building. We talk about doing regular walkthroughs in their building, which is looking at the interaction between teachers and students, helping them analyze any data. That could be data from the school report card. That could be data from systems they have built in their buildings for daily monitoring, weekly monitoring of standard work, and then also making sure that they're providing the additional multi-tiered levels of supports for all their students. And that is an overview of the support that the department provides to CSI schools and TSI schools, and I'll be glad to take any questions that you have.
Thank you, Dr. Foster. I do have a few questions, but first we have a question from Representative Bojanowski.
Okay, so this is the beginning of my question in every committee streak. So here we go. It's like social media. Okay, so I'm a teacher in a Title I school. We aren't TSI or CSI, but we're probably near that. None of these interventions were certified teachers actually working with children, correct? Because what I need in my classroom, and I left it yesterday morning, I'm a special ed teacher, but we need more certified teachers working with students. So whether it's, we have an extreme bottleneck on interventions, in that there just aren't enough teachers. So is that ever a part of the support, or has that been before? And could you speak on that, please?
Sure. So we directly support teachers to coach them on how to provide interventions. The support is not KDE providing additional teachers to a school, but what we're doing is coaching and mentoring teachers on how to implement those supports to students.
May I? I guess so. So that really doesn't address kind of the elephant in the room, is that we need more bodies, more teachers working with students. And I guess that's my point. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We have a question from Representative Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Dr. Foster, for your presentation. And all the things that you said, I think, would really work good in the schools that I grew up in some 40 years ago and went to school in. But my concern now is I was on the Warren County School Board, and we have an elementary school that is 60% EL students. And I think the change in the student body that we have today compared to some 40 years ago has brought on problems that maybe even these great things that you talk about may not fix the problems that we have today. Warren County's got 25 schools, and this is the only CSI school we had, but it's 60% EL students. And I have filed a bill to try to deal with EL testing, but you know, you get a student from the jungles of the Congo, and they come in the day before testing, and then the next year their test scores count against Warren County schools. And that doesn't seem fair to me. I don't know what the answer is, But if school districts don't have these, we've got over 20% of Warren County schools is EL students, 20%. So school districts that don't have this problem now, they're going to have in the next 5 years. So I don't know if you've thought about how we're going to deal with this. It just doesn't seem fair to me that we punish the school systems that are trying to benefit and work as hard as they can with these EL students, and we get punished because of our test scores. So I don't know if there's an answer to this. I'm not blaming anybody. I'm just saying that is a major problem for Warren, Jefferson, Fayette, other districts, Davies. But it's going to be a problem for everybody over the next 5 years as we get more immigrants coming into our school system, some who have never been in formal education. So,
Thank you for your comments. So I'm very familiar with that school that you're referencing. I actually have 3 education recovery staff members that work in that school every day. I have had several conversations with your superintendent and his staff about this specific issue. And so we are very much aware of the needs of that elementary school and are trying to tailor some interventions and even looking at having some conversations about kind of redesigning the structure of that school. Of course, all that's local decision. The EL testing requirement is a federal requirement. So that's not anything KDE has the authority to change. That occurs in all 50 states. But we are working very diligently with that school, the superintendent, and the principal.
thank you. I will say that Congressman Guthrie is aware of this situation, and he's wanting to see how our bill gets through up here and what we can do. But he is interested at making some changes at the federal level with the ESSER requirements and so forth. So I think we have a chance here. If we all work together, we possibly have a chance to get some good things done. So I would appreciate your support and help any way that you can.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have a question from Representative Massaroni.
Thank you. So you're saying the TSI is optional even if you have schools that's qualified for those? Is it the superintendent or is it the school board members who request the assistance from the state?
So in the federal law, the support that goes to the TSI schools is the responsibility of the local level.
Okay.
But because we didn't identify additional CSI schools this year, I have some freed up staff. So we're offering additional support to them that we're not able to do so every year. So that is up to the principal, the superintendent, if they want to opt in to receive that support.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Foster, I do have a few questions. For full disclosure, Dr. Foster and I met during the interim and talked about this subject. How many schools went out of CSI status in this last cycle?
We exited 21 schools from CSI status this year.
Okay. Now, of the schools that are on CSI status, how many schools are regularly on CSI status that don't come out of CSI status? Do you all track that? And as a follow-up to that, do you have schools that go in and out of CSI status, and are you all tracking that?
So currently, we have 8 schools that have stayed in CSI status for a long amount of time. One of the positives of the ESSA law is that there is something now called more rigorous intervention. And so we have 10 schools in the state that this is the first year that they're actually receiving what is called more rigorous intervention. And the thought behind that piece of the federal law is that if you have a school that has been on the CSI list for a long period of time, more rigorous intervention is needed. And the difference between the supports around CSI and the supports around more rigorous intervention is when you're identified as a CSI school, the supports are a suggestion. You know, you have to have leadership buy-in to taking on that opportunity and really making sure that things are being implemented. Once you move into that more rigorous intervention status, then there are requirements. The things that KDE are asking you to do, they are requirements. So we're excited that we are working with 10 schools this year. If you are CSI for 3 years and don't exit, that pushes you into that MRI status. So we are excited about that work that's going on this year.
Dr. Foster, you mentioned there are federal funds available for this. Could you give us a little breakdown on the funding, federal, state, and local, how that works?
Sure. Well, currently there's not any state dollars going towards school improvement in CSI or TSI schools. The federal funds come, and those are a per pupil amount. And so in 2023-24 school year, the school improvement funds awards range from about $39,000 to $817,000 per pupil per school. So that's about an average of $350 per pupil. So depending on school size, we had some schools that received up to $817,000, and some schools, a smaller school, that received around $40,000.
Historically, have you all identified CSI schools on an annual basis?
Yes, historically, we have identified CSI schools on an annual basis. There were some legislative changes in 2020 that prohibited KDE from doing that every year. So we identified, our next identification year will be 2025.
If you had identified schools this year, how many schools would have identified as going on CSI status?
There would have been 26 additional schools that would have been CSI. One of those have closed. So it would be 25 additional schools across the state that would be receiving CSI supports.
So we have 25 schools across the state that they're identified as being in this category of CSI. Are they receiving any supports at all right now, or are they just out there on their own?
So those 25 schools they met the criteria to be CSI, but because we didn't identify this year, they didn't receive that label. But we reached out to all of those schools, and so some of those schools have taken us up on those supports, but not all of them have.
Okay. I'll just say that concerns me. And I
Me
know
as
in our
well.
conversation you're concerned about that as well, and I've looked up that legislation and has some thoughts on that. The main thing is we want to make sure these students succeed, and sometimes students need additional support. Schools need additional supports to help them succeed. We talk about accountability, and this is part of accountability. And you talked about, and I've heard too many. I've got so many acronyms of state government, so I apologize right now. The status of the schools who have been on CSI longer than 3 years, they're getting those additional supports. Is there ever a situation that you've seen, in your opinion, where a school just is not getting there, and something more drastic needs to happen?
Well, I think that's the intent with the federal law on the more rigorous intervention. Mm-hmm. And as I mentioned, the biggest difference in that is that, it is required. So, if a principal or a teacher or superintendent, doesn't want to pursue this avenue, but it becomes a requirement under MRI, then they really don't have a choice. So I think that all schools have different struggles. And I think that the key piece is being able to identify them and tailor the supports based on the needs of each school.
Is there anything in ESSA that would prevent a state from having more rigorous guidelines?
No.
Okay.
ESSA says you must identify CSI at least once every 3. You can do it every year, but ESSA says you must do it at least once every 3. And
Okay.
then the TSI annually.
Okay. I want to shift a little bit here. You talked about the vendors. How many vendors are identified for supports for CSI, and could you name those vendors?
Sure. There are 3 vendors that are currently identified: the Kentucky Department of Education, the University of Virginia, and the Central Kentucky Educational Co-op.
Of those 3 vendors, could you share the breakdown of how they're used by the schools? How they're selected by the schools?
Sure. So once the diagnostic review is delivered to the principal and the superintendent, they also receive information on the vendor list, and they receive contact information and also kind of an overview that each vendor has put together. That's shared with them, and then the local Board of Education and the superintendent choose the vendor.
Am I correct that to this point, only one vendor has been selected by any school district in Kentucky?
Yes, the fall of 23, when we identified, fall of 22. In the fall of 22, when we identified new schools, that was the first year that we had the vendor list that came out of legislation from spring of 20. So that was the first year that we had the vendor list, and KDE was chosen to be the vendor for all of the CSI schools.
Okay. I suppose our conversation has sparked some more questions. Representative Callaway.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate the information. I was looking online. I'm assuming that the list of CSI schools that is online is up to date and correct.
I would hope so, yes.
Okay, because it appears, just for information, that 25 of the 28 are actually Jefferson County schools.
They currently are. I will say the additional 25 schools that if we were able to identify them, are from Pikeville to Paducah.
Okay, that's what I was wondering, is what other areas have been identified. Thank you.
Just for the members' benefit, I have a list of those schools if you'd like to know who they are, where they are. Representative Massaroni. Okay. I didn't want to take away your... Do we have any other members that have questions right now? Well, Dr. Foster, thank you for being here. This is a very important subject as we try to work to improve the quality of education across our state for the benefit of all of our students, and appreciate the work that you do.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you all.
I'll probably have some more follow-up questions at a later date, but thank you all for being here. We have one more item on our agenda today. We received an administrative regulation, and since we are in session, this is a regulation that if it goes through committee today and also through the Senate, can immediately go into effect. It is dealing with the teacher scholarship program. Do we have is someone here from Kia? You're here, Kim? Okay, Kim Dolan's here. Come on up. Could you come up and just identify yourself for the record? I'll swear you in, and just briefly explain what's in this regulation.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Kim Dolan, Vice President of Government Relations, Communications, and Outreach for Kia and Kieslick.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Okay, please just share a little bit what this regulation would do.
Sure. So in the 2023 session, House Bill 319 removed the aggregate limits for the teacher scholarship program. And so what this change would do is it would allow us to increase the per semester maximum awards so that we could award more scholarship money now that we're not dealing with those aggregate limits like we had been in the past.
Any members have any questions? If not, thank you for being here.
Absolutely.
And we will proceed. I will make an announcement. Right, yes. I'm sorry, Representative Timoney.
Thank you, Chairman. Before we adjourn today, obviously today is National Law Enforcement Appreciation, and I want to make sure that all of our SROs that are serving in our schools know how greatly appreciated they are. Thank you.
Thank you so much. They do a great service to all of us. I appreciate you bringing that up. Next week, we will not have a meeting in our regular scheduled time. There's a holiday the day before, and I'm going to be nice to the members and not make them come up early that day. There's also some concern about the extended weather forecast, so if meeting is necessary, we'll just be aware that our next regular meeting will be 2 weeks from today, unless we have a meeting from my call. But if there's nothing else, we are adjourned.